why should the young people trust you with our vote at the general election next year after failing to live up to so many promises at the last election?
Just wait for the applause to die down.
Sorry?
Wait for the applause to die down.
So, as I was saying to your colleague just there, so it's worth just remembering what happened. I'm not Prime Minister. The Liberal Democrats didn't win the election. We got about 24% of the vote, but 9% of seats in the House of Commons. So what we did, because you didn't mention it, but I'm assuming you're alluding to the tuition fees issue. We obviously, concentrated on the priorities which we could deliver. So a massive change in the income tax system, so you've got 3 million people on low pay not paying income tax, a total change in apprenticeships, which are now more numerous than they've ever been before, a revolution in childcare, making sure that poor kids get the right kind of education through something called a pupil premium, more money into our schools for that, better parental leave, a total change in pensions to make sure that pensions are fair, and so on and so forth. What we did on the issue of how we fund our universities is that because both the other two parties, the Conservative and Labour parties, one of course introduced fees and both wanted them to go up, there was no way, whether we'd gone into coalition with the Conservatives or Labour, the result would have been the same. Fees would have gone up. So the next best thing, if you like, if I can put it that, which is what David Willits and Vince Cable did, was to make sure that we have a system in place where, you're quite right, the ticket price goes up, but the amount of money that needs to be paid back by graduates after they've graduated, oddly enough, goes down. So I don't know, if you're a graduate in the new system, earning an average income of 24,000, under the system we'd inherited from the previous government, the Labour government, you were paying £67.50, I think it was, per month. You're now paying £22.50. You're paying it for a longer period of time. I mean, if you can't pay it off, you don't, and it gets paid off for you. So that, I've never hidden the fact that those were the kind of realities of an election where no one won outright, so no one had the right to deliver their manifesto in full, in the same way that the Conservatives have not been able to either.
So does that satisfy you, Zach?
I understand what you're saying about how you didn't get the majority, so you can't push everything through. But a lot of young people would have voted for that sole issue of the tuition fees, and it's all very well you saying you're sorry about it and whatever, but why should anyone go back and vote for you again after you failed to deliver on what they would have voted for you solely on last time?
OK, we'll take a few more audience points, actually, because I imagine we'll get that echoed. Yes, lady here, please.
This might be completely unrelated to his question, but have you ever struggled? Exactly. Have you ever had... have you ever been in school and wanted desperately to get a job, but you can't get a job because you don't have experience, and then you can't get experience because you don't have a job, you can't buy lunch, so you can't do your work, and then because you can't do your work, you're getting D's and E's, and then they're going to tell you you can't go to university because you haven't got the grades, simply because you've struggled. Have you ever been through that?
I've been incredibly lucky in my life, and I've never pretended I'm anything other than I am. I'm a very lucky guy. I had a very happy childhood, and I've never sort of pretended that I have struggled in the way that you have alluded to. What I've tried to do in politics, whether it is making sure that we've now got more apprenticeships than we've ever had before, ever as a country, making sure that we try and fix the absolutely shattered economy that we had 4 or 5 years ago, so that there are jobs for young people to go to. And by the way, doing so at the great cost of a lot of sort of unpopularity, because we had to do a lot of difficult things. I think time and time again in my politics, I'm not trying to hold myself up in my personal life to sort of provide any kind of paragon of virtue or lesson to you, but in my politics, of course, I've tried to do the fair thing to make sure that there are opportunities for people, and thankfully, there are still far too many young people who are looking for work, but there are fewer people out of work now than there were at the beginning of this Parliament. So, we are pointing things in the right direction. There are more opportunities than there were even just a few years ago.
Do you feel like there are more opportunities?
Not really, because if
What's your situation?
My situation? Oh, I work now, but I've been struggling to get a part-time job for like, since I turned 16, I thought, 16 now, national insurance, going to be easy. It really wasn't. I must have sent out 100, probably over 100 job applications to get no's, you're too young, you're too inexperienced, and so many different things. But if you haven't struggled like I have, or like a lot of people like me have, how can you know what the fair thing to do is?
Well, I mean, I think the issue in politics, of course, as long as we live in a representative democracy, you're always going to have a few hundred folk down the road in Westminster who are trying, imperfectly no doubt, to represent their constituents. So my constituency's in a different part of the country. It's from Sheffield. And I don't pretend, personally, to be like every single person of the 60,000 odd folk that I represent. Of course not. We're all different. We're all different. But what makes us human is not are we identical, but do we have the imagination to imagine what it's like to be somebody else, not to pretend that we've been through all the same experiences. Do we have the compassion? Do we have the empathy?
Well,
do we have the wish to...
You clearly don't, because tuition fees are $9,000 a year.
Yeah, well, can I just explain... but the point you're making is a very interesting one. The point you make about someone struggling at school to get the right grades to go to university, of course, that's not actually affected by about the terms which you're going to university. What's that affected by is how we properly fund our schools and how we make sure particularly kids from the most disadvantaged backgrounds get more help than they used to. And on that, I hope you'd agree that my record has been very, very strong to make sure, for instance, there are £2.5 billion of extra money through something called a pupil premium, something I first wrote about over 10 years ago, which is money targeted at kids, by the way, particularly very small kids, and I know this as a dad of small kids, that if you get help, particularly for those kids who otherwise won't get it, before a child even hangs up their coat at the first day of primary school, that has a more dramatic effect on their subsequent life chances, on their ability to go to university, than anything else we can do. And actually what this government has done, despite all the controversy and criticisms, is we've ploughed massive amounts of money where it can make the biggest difference to a child's life chances, namely when they're 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. And that is something I'm actually immensely proud of. I accept the results of those policies. They're very progressive policies we probably won't see as a country for another 10 or 15 years. But it's one of the proudest things I've done, because I know if you invest in little children when they're young, that has the biggest effect on helping them live out their dreams as they get older.
OK. Yeah, gentleman here in the front row.
Do you recognise this poster, Nick?
Yes.
You do?
Yes.
I'd like to know why you went back on this one as well, and why you really think we should trust you again, now you're in power.
No, I didn't.
This
I
is
mean,
the
for those who can't see it, in 2008, you might see there's a very fresh-faced photograph of me. Are you a member of UKIP, or...?
Possibly, yeah.
You are? Oh. Okay. There you go. Every time No, I don't say that accusatorily. Okay. It's good you're involved in politics. It's a pity you're involved with that lot, but... I only know you're from UKIP because I obviously do lots of public meetings, and UKIP foot soldiers like yourself always turn up waving this thing very furiously. That was a leaflet in 2008 when the country was debating a new treaty for the European Union called the Lisbon Treaty. You may remember that. And I said at the time, as I believe now, that when we as a country sign up to a new treaty, it's like a constitution, really, which sets the rules about how decisions are taken in the European...
This mentions nothing about the constitution.
No,
all it says is we should have a referendum on...
Had you read it before? I just saw you reading it there.
Yeah. And I read it again.
Just checking.
I read it again. It's not about the constitution. This was about giving the people a say.
It was about the ratification...
Parliament could have had a referendum, they put it through, and your MPs didn't vote for it, despite saying...
That's not true. So in
you tell me it's not true, then.
No, it's not. In 2008, we had this Lisbon Treaty, and I said then, as I've said all my life... Well, you asked me, did I recognise that leaflet? That leaflet was issued...
It doesn't mention Lisbon Treaty.
OK, can I just explain? And so there was a question about how you ratify a new treaty. So when you enter into a new set of rules which changes the way in which, what decisions are taken here, what decisions are taken in Europe, and so on. And I've said then, and I've said all my political life, that a big treaty like that shouldn't be ratified over the heads of the British people, shouldn't be ratified over your heads or even behind your backs. You should have that decision in a referendum, on a referendum which says whether we should stay in or go out of the European Union. I've always believed, in fact, I believed in that so much that shortly after I entered into this coalition government in 2010, we legislated to create for the first time in this country a legal guarantee that when there's another treaty, we'll do exactly what I said on that leaflet, which is we'll have an in-out referendum. Where I disagree with you and with your party leader, and I did so fairly publicly in some well, look, he may or may not, you may or may not think he defeated. I think on the argument, I personally...
The people voted and said he defeated you. Why don't you give the people a decision to decide whether they stay in or they leave?
Yeah.
The only reason you won't give them a say is because you don't like the answer you're going to get.
No.
That's the fact. Be honest, vote for the referendum and then you can decide where the people stand.
Are you also a fellow...
I run UKIP Shift Wing.
I
believe in democracy. You stand here and say
so
people should decide, but you don't believe people should be given a say.
I believe in democracy, of course I do, we all do. And my view, you may not like it, but you don't have to sort of shout me down for it, my view is that the moment we have a referendum in this country is when we are being asked to give up new powers to the European Union. Your leader, your party, thinks we should have a referendum next Tuesday. I personally think, or metaphorically speaking, I personally think when the economy is really fragile, when we're still trying to produce jobs which youngsters can go into, holding a referendum about whether we remain in what is the world's largest marketplace of 500 million consumers or not, just because Nigel Farage wants to, would actually destroy jobs and destroys investment in this country.
I don't think we should trust Nick, and I would recommend that he changes the name of the Liberal Democrat Party to the Anti-Progress Party or the Anti-Change Party, because what you've done throughout your government is vote against what you used to stand for. I mean, you voted against the people's right to recall their MP.
No.
You voted against the people's right to have a referendum on our membership of the European Union. You told your MPs to do it. No, you are anti-democracy, Nick. Admit it.
Sorry, we can disagree on opinions, but let's at least establish the facts. The facts are that
Change your name.
Well, I don't mind.
He's going to change his name.
My mum would be very upset if I suddenly changed my name, however much you might want me to. Look, on the referendum, as I said to our two friends here, we have legislated, and I, as Deputy Prime Minister of this government, was very keen we do this and insisted we do this, for the first time ever, that you and everybody, we all have a legal guarantee, which can't be tampered with by future governments, that when there's this new treaty, like there was the Treaty of Lisbon, we then have a referendum whether we stay in or out. And on the recall of MPs, actually, that is something that I insisted should go into the coalition agreement that formed the basis of this government, and which we're now legislating on. We're now legislating right now. It's being discussed in the House of Commons now to make sure that you have the right that when your local MP, I don't know, where do you live?
Battersea.
Okay, who's your local MP?
Jane Ellison.
I'm sure she wouldn't do anything horribly wrong, but if she committed some serious wrongdoing and it was shown that she'd done so, you wouldn't, under the provisions of this legislation which we are debating right now, you wouldn't have to wait to the next election. You could have your say to trigger a by-election straight away. So, I accept we might have different opinions about life, but we can't...
You haven't made democracy more representative. That's what the Lib Dems promised.
You took another coffee after the show. If you want to, Nick, only if you want to. Let's have a look at the online, please,
Let's represent some comments from people who are watching at home online. This one from George. If I had a penny for every time Nick Clegg broke a promise, I would have enough to go to uni. So if Nick Clegg isn't Prime Minister and can't do what his manifesto promised, why is he in government? And then this one from Josh. Josh, I agree the Lib Dems didn't make good on their promises, but it wasn't the best situation for them. Let's focus on the present. A lot of people are asking then, let's talk about the future. What will you do? Would you scrap tuition fees? Would you cut them?
I've learned my lesson of saying something which we couldn't, with hindsight, clearly deliver.
If you stayed in a coalition, you stay in power.
Yeah, that's a good point, though, because, of course, some of the facts which made it impossible for us to deliver that one policy haven't changed. We've still got very little money as a country. We still, in terms of politics, both the other two larger parties want to see fees stay or go up. And I think it's right for us as a country, as the last person said, is, regardless of what you think of me or the Liberal Democrats or the last election, is look at what's happening now. And oddly enough, actually, you remember all the predictions when we made the change. People said people wouldn't go to university, youngsters from black minority ethnic backgrounds wouldn't go to university, kids from disadvantaged backgrounds would be discouraged from going to university because of that key fact that I said to you earlier, that if you're on an average wage, you're actually going to be paying about a third, actually, out of your bank account every month, having gone to university, than the old system. Actually, what's happened in practice, which I think, well, no critic predicted, was that we've now got a higher proportion of youngsters going into full-time university courses than ever before, a higher proportion of youngsters from black minority ethnic backgrounds going into university than ever before, and more kids, a higher proportion of kids from disadvantaged backgrounds going into, I think, because, and I genuinely mean this, forget the politics, forget, who said what when and who did what when and who could deliver or couldn't deliver their things. I think what has happened is that people have looked at the details and realised that there is no impediment at all to going to university. If you can't pay off what you owe, it gets paid off for you, and you only pay back what you can pay back during your working life long after you've left university. I think that's right for us as a country to look at the facts, dare I say it, rather than some of the polemic around that very anguished decision. So
you're saying raising tuition fees was a good thing then?
No, I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm saying that what's happened since that... No, of course not. Look, as I said earlier, I would dearly like to have won the last election, and I would dearly like to be able to implement my manifesto. I'd love to be Prime Minister. I'm not. And look, but can I just say, if you... I mean, I don't know whether any of you've got a well-thumbed copy of the Liberal Democrat manifesto of 2000... No, none of you admitting that you are. OK.
Yeah, this guy might have, you never know.
But if you did, you'd see that on the front page of our manifesto, we said that the things that we were really going to focus on was the pupil premium that I talked about earlier, was raising the point at which people pay income tax to 10,000 quid. Actually, next year it'll be 10,500, taking lots of people on low pay out of paying any income tax. We'd try and sort out the banks and the economy, and we'd push for political reform. We actually religiously stuck to what we said on the front page of the manifesto, but of course we couldn't, because we didn't win. We couldn't deliver our manifesto in full.